Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. I talk about books here, a lot of books. So this is going to be a tag, but it's also just a way of framing a Q1 wrap-up, which I was looking for. And I saw this originally at Shelley Swearingen's channel, which is fantastic. Her enthusiasm is infectious, and you should check her out. And I also saw this at Gemma Books, which has a similar quality. Both of them read fairly different books, but their tastes are fairly in line with mine. It's hard to not be in line with my tastes with the amount that I read, but there it is still. And it's called the Quarter Year Crisis book tag. To be clear, I'm not in a crisis. Similarly to when I do a mid-year freak out, I'm not freaking out. It's just a way of framing it that is got some prompts that are productive. So first tag, how many books have you read so far? I have read 128 books this year so far, including one DNF. So some people don't count those. Have you already found a book you think might be a 2022 favorite? If not, what was your favorite book you read that wasn't quite 5 stars? So I have a few to mention. A bunch of them were just last week because I had a fantastic week. I just was picking the cream of the crop. I was done with the BookTube prize. I just started picking up books pretty much that I got around the holidays last year, or slightly after when everyone was doing their absolute favorite books of last year. And I spent all my, Christmas money and stuff like that on those books. It take a while to get here, and then I had some other commitments, and I'm always attracted to the new shiny thing, but I've been trying to get to those older ones, which aren't very old, to great effect. So some of my favorites so far: Stories We Tell Our Children by Mark Nash, phenomenal short story collection. Best that I've read, I think, in line with Dream of a Woman by Casey Plett, trans woman collection that was very smart, similar to Mark Nash's, where it has a through line. In this case, it has a short story we've woven throughout each of the other short stories to sort of like ground it all. It worked phenomenally for me. Mark Nash is more higher concept, as you might imagine, and has a sort of, I guess you could say, thesis about child rearing, more like observations, inferences, anecdotes, and just thoughts about the subject, where every story is geared towards that thematically, so that even if you don't fully connect with any one story, you see why it's there, what it added to it, and the prose work is just such that you get through it anyway, having enjoyed it, even if you haven't connected with specifically the thematic thing that is happening, or the tangential thematic thing that is being gone into in relation to the overall topic. So I find it hard to believe that I would kind of surpass that collection because of the structure and organization and how well it hit for me, but I guess you never know. It's the strongest short story collection that I've read so far, certainly over Dream of a Woman, but both of those were 5 stars, so, Then Ada, the book that I just reviewed by Jarek Kobek, which I found on Mark Nash's channel, about the person who organized a specific cell who had flown one of the jets that hit the Twin Towers on 9/11, and that was just a fantastic piece of fiction that I think is like bordering required reading type deal, where you put yourself in the position of somebody else, and it is not allowing you to draw a caricature of the persons who commit terrorist acts. It interrogates a lot of stuff that is pertinent to Western culture, and like a masterclass on motivated thinking. So fantastic. A Ghost in the Throat was my #1 memoir so far. It's about a housewife who is very educated in post-secondary, but puts that aside to rear children, and then connects with a very specific Gaelic poem, I believe, if I recall, and does her own translation of it as she goes on her own sort of journey to figure out what's going on with her, as well as the past of what was going on with the writer and the family and descendants of that original poem. Masterful stuff. Loved it. Again, prose that were fire. Gay Bar, another memoir that was just fantastic. It's all about queer spaces, how much they disappear, how much vital history is in living persons that needs to be put down and passed down because they're the institutions that gay people and queer people erect are almost always torn down by heteronormative people that are looking to tear down that kind of stuff, or just life events that occur, etc. There is there's not as much lasting history as in, of course, our normal culture. So it was just a great bit of writing. And yeah, that was, I found off, of course, Bob from the channel, Bookerer, obviously, Jesus. The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. I just love Donna Tartt, and this was such a surprise because everybody kind of like maligns that book, and it's so good. It shifts genre as though the adolescent teenager in it is sort of probing and trying to figure out her own self. Phenomenal. A lot of people don't like that because it plays with genre expectations that aren't fully delivered, because the sort of selling bit is that her younger or older brother at the time, her brother, is murdered at a very young age, and she grows up with the specter of that over her family and over the town. And so you kind of think that you're getting like a Harriet person, whoever that name of that famous person is. Harriet something, the spy. No. Yeah, Harriet, somebody who's like Sherlock Holmes, figuring that kind of stuff out. You know who it is. Nancy Drew, probably. Chouette, fantastic novel. It's an unhinged women book about motherhood, which I really like, but the uniqueness of it is that it equally sort of criticizes the mother and the father of the child who was born with some syndromes and is intersexual with some sort of disablement that we don't really get the full context of. It is kind of mentioned in the book in parting, but because of the unreliable narrator, you don't really know what's real or not. Essentially, she believes that her daughter is feral and an owl, Chouette, and the father is the juxtaposition of that narration voice that thinks that her name is Charlotte and that she's not feral, and he keeps trying to essentially fix her as a disabled child, and whether or not, the toxic elements that are happening there, it's very surrealistic. I have a full video out on that, and I named it like Feral Surrealism, which I'm very proud of. House of Leaves, just a phenomenal book that I think everybody is acquainted with. It's very intertextual. There's a few different narrations happening at the same time, interjections by other narrators. There's a lot of stuff going on. Just the most fun I've had reading, studying a text, and sort of dissecting it. Nervous System stands out for its prose work, and it is very heavy subject matter, but was just, a great read, though I had to parcel it out, even though it is a short book, because it's so heavy and just demanded a lot of bandwidth from me, essentially. It is about a woman who is in a PhD candidate program, I believe, trying to get her thesis done, and is just struggling the most with writing, which I can very much relate to. But also sort of dissecting her relationships with usually the men in her family, and how that sort of corresponds to the things that are unraveling in her life. And it goes in surprising directions at the end that I thought really capstoned that book in a way that I wasn't sure that the heaviness was going to be kind of validated, but it really did work out, so stand out. And then Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, best main character ever. Really kind of Fleabaggy attachment to that character, which is something that almost never happens to me. I almost always focus on the macro or craft work stuff. Like I'll note that the character work was good, but I won't usually remember their name. It's usually a peripheral component or byproduct of good craft or prose or whatever. And so, yeah, was just such an excellent book that was surprisingly funny, surprisingly endearing. Any one-star books, least favorite books of the year. The only DNF that I have right now is Checkout 19, which I was surprised at, but is just like a conflict of me not liking the perspective and prose. Oh no, wait, I have another one, The Promise, ironically, which was another one that I was super looking forward to. Could not get my brain around that perspective. Something around the framing and the narration and the perspective combination was just so jarring, and it created so much dissonance in my head that I couldn't even pay attention to what was going on. And so I just dipped out. And then the biggest letdown is To Paradise, for sure. I had high expectations of that due to A Little Life being one of my all-time favorite books, and it didn't come anywhere near that. And then similarly, Oh Beautiful, I did not like near as much as I expected, and I have a full review on that as well. But it's about a journalist, unreliable narrator, who goes to a small town, oil town that is exactly like the one that I live in, essentially, to do a story on how the rigs are affecting the town, and sort of like the patriarchy, feminism, intersectional stuff that's going on there, where women kind of have an ostensible power dynamic flipped, where they can kind of get whatever guy they want just because there's so little women to men ratio, but it's not really true power. And it just goes in a very unsatisfying direction while leaving so many tangents. It basically just wants to sort of like hop skip along all these issues that are very deep, but not really sink into any of them. Most read genre so far, literary fiction. If I remember, I'll put a picture of the whole thing. It's literary fiction, and then I think fantasy, which makes sense. Hopefully, well, I don't know. I guess it'll depend, but I imagine literary will be way more than even the disparity that we're seeing right now. But you never know. There could be some fantasy books that catch my eye this year. So far, there's only Fevered Star, the follow-up to Black Sun by Roan Horse. That's sort of the only thing that's on my radar. Maybe Emily St. Mantel's book, but it's like the concept isn't getting me high or anything. So sounds like maybe I'll get to a book. A book that surprised you, Satellite Love. I had no idea kind of what it was about, but it went in a very heavy, sad, introspective, all of the trigger warnings kind of way for I believe it's a YA book, about bullying, essentially, about a child who doesn't fit in with her parents, and so has like the weight of obligations on her, and then is bullied at school, and it kind of compounds into a surrealistic tale that gets very for real, very surprising. Book that's come out in 2022 that you want to read but haven't yet, The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. I'm not going to recount the marketing on that because that's all I know about it, and for all I know that could be not what the actual book is about because it's just marketing copy. But boy, that marketing copy sounds like peripheral to Cyberpunk, which just got me hot and heavy right away. I really loved A Visit to the Goon Squad. Haven't read anything else by Egan, so we'll see what happens, but sounds absolutely phenomenal, and like cutting edge tech type stuff being interrogated in a non-linear, multi-perspective way from what I recall. One goal you made that you're succeeding at. I'm on track for 400. I'm 21, something like that, ahead of my schedule. This is kind of funny because last year I read 584 with the original goal of 400, so we'll see if I ramp up again or not. I don't really care. Like, I've already read 128 books, which is enough. Like, if I stopped reading for the rest of the year, I've read more than most people have already, so it just seems kind of silly to be like on track for 400, woohoo. Like, I'll just do what I continue to do. Doesn't really matter. One goal you made that you need to focus on. I need to really focus this year on reading more diversely, which I organically always do. I always gravitate towards women more so than male perspectives, women authors over male. But I've been making an effort to read some chunkster books and backlog books and group reads, which have so far all been men. And so I've noticed that, taken note, and will be steering towards women even more, and marginalized and diverse people more, because it's definitely been looking straight white for the past maybe month, I think. So definitely lots of time to correct that trend. And I mean, surely more group reads in the future will be geared towards that. But I mean, we had the War and Peace one. I'm doing Don Quixote right now, and I'm doing the Luminaries soon, which is a woman, I believe, so that's fine. And there was another huge one, the Magic Mountain by Man. So that's why I was like, ooh, I mean, 3 in 128 is not bad, but it is a trend occurring at the exact same time. So when you see them lined up on your Goodreads all in a row, you're like, oh, should check that. New to you booktubers, bookstagrammer, booktokers for 2022, you'll recommend lately that come to mind, but surely not all people. Books with Zara did a fantastic video, someone I hadn't heard of, on The Darkness That Comes Before, my favorite fantasy series of all time. And I learned that it's not R. Scott Bakker, it's Baker, which actually makes sense, and I had to correct myself for Bakker when someone else corrected me that it was Bakker, and it's not, it's Baker. Anyway, you don't care. It's R. Scott Bakker, Darkness That Comes Before, Prince of Nothing trilogy / the overall trilogy, and then Quartet is the second Apocalypse. And it's just phenomenal dark fantasy. I did repost it on my community posting thing, or whatever that's called. Definitely check that out if you're into fantasy. It's literary, dark fantasy interrogating misogyny is how I would put it and sell it to people. Then Bibliosophie, just a very charming person from New York who, I don't know what's up with her, but she seems to be reading a week or a month ahead of me exactly what I'm going to be reading, like the most excited books that I have on my TBR near the top. She's like seemingly plucking them and talking about them very eruditely, intelligently, thoughtfully. So I've been really enjoying that. And then obviously Queer is a very underrated channel. I think she just doesn't post as much, so the algorithm doesn't put her out on the feeds of people as much maybe, but fantastic channel. She is a queer woman who is, I guess, primarily into YA, fantasy, sci-fi, but that's not all. She's an academic that recently interrogated the notion of tops and bottoms in a queer novel, and it was just like the most thoughtful essay on the subject in a way that wasn't like reactionary and like overblown, which was kind of interesting because at the beginning it kind of seems like it's going that way. Like she's very funny about it, and it's certainly very funny, but when she does sort of hone her gaze into interrogating the sort of queer politics of it, just phenomenal stuff. You won't be seeing it on Twitter. It's basically like a long form essay / review of that book. Dang, I'm trying to remember what that book is called. The People Outside of Us, The Stars Outside of Us, something like that. Hopefully I'll have the book or video here beside me. That's it, that's the tag. I would love to see anybody doing this. I don't want to tag people because I feel like it puts like a little bit of pressure on people. If you do a this tag or a thing like it, a wrap up of the quarter, please tag me. You can mention me now. I'm the glow up on YouTube has happened. I am mentionable now. So hopefully that was a little short. I don't know. It feels like it was a long video, so if so, I apologize. But hopefully also substantive for people who haven't been catching my weekly videos. And I will see you next video as usual. It will probably be the normal Monday, Tuesday schedule that I do now, where I do a weekly wrap-up and one tag video. See ya.